the Premier of Queensland, the Honourable Annastacia Palaszczuk MP, Leader of the Opposition, Deb Frecklington MP, Mayors, Councillors, Ministers, Sponsors and guests, welcome to the Queensland Media Club Leaders Debate, and an important fixture in the Queensland election campaign. After an extended break to the Media Club, it's great to be back in style. I'm Peter Kelly from 3plus, and I'll be one of your MCs today, sharing the duties with Stephen Wardill from the Courier Mail, who'll moderate the debate from 1 p.m. This event on the final day of the campaign is a sellout, which is testimony to the level of interest and uncertainty around the outcome of tomorrow's poll. This event will be broadcast live on television and social media from 1, so we ask for your cooperation in ensuring a much larger audience beyond this room can hear our two leaders and the questions from the media. We're able to present these events only with the support of our sponsors. Our naming rights sponsors, Brisbane Airport Corporation, the operator of the Brisbane Airport, the gateway to Queensland and normally welcoming 23 million passengers a year, currently welcoming far fewer than that, and a business doing it tough, the Queensland Media Club thanks the Brisbane Airport for its ongoing support. Dial Before You Dig, a national referral service for information on the location of utilities' underground assets anywhere in Australia. And Griffith University, created to be a different kind of university, challenging conventions, creating bold new trends and pioneering solutions. Ranked in the top 2% of universities worldwide, its future-focused degrees are developed in consultation with industry based on cutting-edge research and taught by Australia's most awarded teachers. Please thank our naming rights sponsors. Our seasoned partner is Arrow Energy, an integrated CSG company working to meet the domestic and international demand for cleaner energy. Our club partners are New Hope Group, a majority Australian-owned, Queensland-based diversified energy company with business interests and operations spanning coal mining, agriculture, exploration, port operation, oil and innovative technologies. Telstra, whose purpose is to build a connected future so everyone can thrive, with a long and proud history of contributing to Queensland's economic and social development. Telstra is committed to staying close to its customers and providing them the best experience, delivering the best tech on the best network. Shell QGC, one of Australia's leading natural gas producers, focused on developing Queensland's world-class onshore gas reserves, and the Queensland Futures Institute, a unique partnership of academic, business, community and social services, government, industry and research organisations that seek faster economic and social growth through collaborative public policy reform. Please thank our season and club partners. Finally, our venue partner is the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre, named the world's best convention centre, one of Queensland's great success stories. This event was one of the first venues to reopen after operating under a COVID-safe plan approved by Queensland Health. The centre continues to host successful events, providing assurance and confidence to the industry. And the managers of the Queensland Media Club, 3plus, specialists in risk and reputation management and strategic communications. Please thank our venue partner and our managers. Now we have Stephen Wardill from the Courier Mail at the front of the room here. He's going to join our two speakers for a toss of the coin, for the right to choose who goes first. I think Stephen's going to toss and the Premier will get to call.
All right, the Premier's going second.
It's a head and the Premier has elected to go second, which means the Leader of the Opposition, Deb Frecklington, will open. And the Premier will close. Before I leave you, I want to pay tribute to retiring parliamentarians across the state. One of them is here today, Minister Kate Jones. There are a number of other ministers retiring. I want to congratulate all retiring parliamentarians on their service to the people of Queensland and wish them well in their future careers. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Wardill and I will be the moderator for today's debate. Barton Green has just asked me to do a show of hands whether everybody has voted. Can you put your hand up if you've voted already? Oh, there's a few people undecided, so we're not completely wasting our time today, at least. Our format today will start with 5 minutes opening statements from each leader, followed by one question to each other. There's time limits they're both aware of. Journalists from the gallery will be asking a series of questions to both Ms Palaszczuk and Ms Frecklington. The leaders will then be asked to give one final question to each other. So we'll get underway straight away. So without further ado, can I invite to the stage the Queensland Premier, the Honourable Annastacia Palaszczuk. And the Leader of the Opposition, Deb Frecklington. Now, the Premier won the toss, so she gets to start, did she? Is that right? Or is it the other way? Who won?
I won, but I said... that
oh, you're going second. Deb's going first. Okay.
More than happy to, Steve. Ready to go?
Ready to go. There'll be a chime at some stage too. So.
Okay, to cut me off. No worries. Well, thank you very much, Steve, and thank you very much to the Queensland Media Club. It is fantastic to be here for the Premier and my second debate of this week. I'm really excited for it. And the reason why I'm so excited for it is because the LNP has a bold, ambitious, visionary plan to grow this economy and create jobs. Now, the LNP actually has vision for this great state, and that vision is to make Queensland back into the economic powerhouse that it used to be. Our vision is to make sure that Queensland is the best place to live, the best place to get ahead, and the best place to raise your family. Now, we'll start by injecting $1.1 billion worth of stimulus, much-needed stimulus, back into our economy by Christmas with a $300 rego rebate. We'll reduce household water prices by $600 over 4 years because we know families are doing it tough. We'll grow the economy by investing in infrastructure to get the tradies back into work. Ladies and gentlemen, the new Bradfield scheme, a true nation-building project, four-laning the Bruce Highway, building the second M1. We will employ thousands more teachers, more nurses and doctors, and hundreds more police. Now, the LNP's economic plan will create 150,000 jobs. And we need it. We need ambition. And that's why I have set the ambitious target of 5% unemployment for this great state of ours, because I think Queensland deserves a bit of ambition. Now, in stark contrast, the Labor Party have refused to name a target, they've refused to deliver a budget, and they've refused to give Queenslanders a plan to recover from the greatest economic crisis that Queensland has faced since the Depression. Now, this election, ladies and gentlemen, is a clear choice. It's a clear choice between the positive LNP's visionary plan to grow the economy and create jobs and more Labor failures. That's the choice. Now, the Premier is right when she says, with Labor, what you see is what you get. Well, what you get with Labor is the highest unemployment rate in the nation. What you get with Labor is the lowest business confidence in the nation. What you get from Labor is the highest number of bankruptcies. Now, no government in this country has failed like the Labor government here in Queensland. They have failed on education, they have failed on health services, they have failed on crime, they've failed our children, and they've failed on infrastructure, and they've failed on integrity. Now, they have failed this economy by refusing to grow jobs. There are 209,000 Queenslanders out of work. That is the highest unemployment rate in the nation. That is a shocking figure to rest on. And that is all the Palaszczuk government have got after 5 years of failure. So, ladies and gentlemen, this election is a clear choice. It's a clear choice between a positive economic plan or no economic plan. Business as usual. Well, business as usual just won't cut it. It's a choice between the LNP, who'll reduce surgery wait lists, or Labor, who will prioritise changing hospital names. It's a choice between the LNP, who will back the resources industry and mining jobs, or the Labor Party, who will change the goalposts on New Hope, just like they did on Adani. And it's a choice between Labor with the highest debt or lower debt under the LNP. I want Queensland to be at the top of the economic ladder, again, not at the bottom. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the clear choice. It is a clear choice. Who can lead Queensland out of this recession? We cannot afford another 4 years. Make no mistake, Labor's 5 years of failures cannot be repeated for the next generation. Let's get Queensland working again. Thanks, Steve.
Premier, over to you.
Thanks, Steve. And can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Can I acknowledge Minister Kate Jones, ALP Party President John Badhams and my Campaign Director Jules Campbell that's with us here. Ladies and gentlemen, one and all. At this election, you have a very clear and a very important choice to make about the future of our great state. There is Labor's plan to come out the other side of this storm stronger and fairer, rebuilding our economy, training our people, growing our regions and investing in schools and hospitals and the services that every family across Queensland needs. This election is about a choice of stability or chaos. It is the chaos of an unproven, untrustworthy opposition who still can't explain where the money is coming from for their promises. It's your vote, your choice for Queensland. A choice between jobs or cuts. A choice between stability and strong leadership or chaos and reckless behaviour. It's increasingly clear that this is a tight election. It will come down to the wire. Every single vote is important. That's why my team and I are asking for your support and your vote to secure a majority government for Queensland. If you look around Queensland today, you can see our COVID economic recovery in full swing. And I look around the room here today and I see everyone out and about. In other countries around the world, that's not the case. They're either in lockdown, businesses are shut, or they're in their homes. In Victoria, they're just coming out of lockdown due to the second wave. I don't want that for Queensland. I want a safe Queensland. I want a Queensland where your grandparents and your parents, whether they're in aged care or living at home, are safe and secure. I want our hospitals to be able to do our elective surgery, not shut down because they're overrun with COVID. And make no mistake, COVID is real. We are learning more and more about it each and every day, and that's why I've had to take tough decisions. I've had to make very tough decisions in the best interests of Queenslanders. Every single day when I'm out and about, my priority is about the people of this great state. I want the best for them. I want their families to achieve whatever they can and follow their dreams. I want their children to get the training they need. That's why we've focused on regional economic plans. It's about jobs. It's about saying what are the needs for those regions in the future and how can we match those skills and the children. That's why we're offering free TAFE for under 25s, free apprenticeships. We want to make sure that we are a powerhouse for hydrogen into the future. I want to see a state where our economy is flourishing. Our closed borders have meant that our economy has been able to get underway. And our plan is about 55,000 jobs of our economic recovery plan. But then our election commitments that we have announced will also mean an additional 50,000. Before COVID hit, we'd had 5 budget surpluses. We'd created 250,000 jobs across our great state. And then COVID hit. and the world was turned upside down. We don't know what the future holds, but I do know that we have some of the best brains in Queensland that are working on a vaccine. Imagine what that would mean. I know that we have some of the best and brightest minds in this state, but I also know at the end of the day, I represent an electorate where people struggle sometimes to put food on the table, and I want the best for them and I want the best for their families. And that is why I will always stand up for what's right in this state. I want to see opportunity for our young people. I want our state to grow and prosper. That's the Queensland that I love, and that's the Queensland I want for everyone in this room and at home today.
The first question is going to come from the Opposition Leader, Deb Frecklington.
Thank you very much, Steve. So, Premier, in the last 5 years, there has been the Mark Bailey Mango Cube email account scandal, Peter Russo doing paid work for legal aid while he's a Member of Parliament and the Chair of the Legal Affairs Committee. You tried to extort the Katter Party, resulting in you being found in contempt of Parliament. Stephen Miles rigged a poll to change the name of the Lady Salento Hospital. Your Chief of Staff's company received $267,000 of Queensland taxpayers' money in a funded grant. There was Jackie Trad's secret investment property scandal, Jackie Trad's interference with the hiring of a local school principal, and Jim Sawley accepting cash in a basement car park to lobby Minister Mark Bailey and Jackie Trad. How can Queenslanders trust you with another 4 years after 5 years of integrity scandals?
And I thank the Leader of the Opposition, and can I start by saying that Queenslanders can trust me because every day I'm keeping them safe. I'm doing everything I possibly can to ensure that we do not see what's happened in other parts of the world and what's happened in Victoria. That's what drives me, and people know me. I said that I would always accept the advice of the Chief Health Officer, and that's exactly what I have done.
Premier.
I reject the premise of the Leader of the Opposition's question, and let me say this. In those issues that she raised, there was never any finding of any corrupt conduct. Let me say this secondly. It is the Leader of the Opposition's party that has referred her to the Electoral Commission around political developer
That is not
donations.
true. That is not
That
true.
was published, it was in the paper, and unfortunately we are still do not... Well,
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Stevie, must be
I'm not
true.
going to comment on the Courier Mail. Or Peter
ABC,
Gleeson.
I think.
So no answer to the
ABC.
integrity
No,
scandals.
honestly. And then let me say this.
Found in contempt of Parliament, the only
Oh,
Premier in Australia.
Yeah. Anyway, at the end of the day, the people of this state want jobs, they want someone who they can trust, and they want leadership and they want stability. And that's what my team will deliver to the people of Queensland.
Your turn, Premier.
I have a question from Gabby, and she's a nurse in Townsville, and she'd like me to ask you this. I believed Campbell Newman and the LNP when he said before the 2012 election that he wasn't going to sack workers. And then when he got in, I saw him sack hundreds of health workers in Townsville, including nurses like me. I saw the impact it had on our ability to our job caring for our community, and I heard you fully supported the decisions he made. Why should we believe you when you say you aren't going to sack workers and nurses like me when you can't explain how you are going to fund your promises?
Well, that is a fantastic question, Premier, and it's almost like a Dorothy Dixer in Parliament, really, isn't it? Because I have already announced that we will employ an extra 2,530 nurses, an extra 840 allied health professionals, an extra 320 ambulance officers. We've announced 36 extra contract tracing. I'll tell you this, Gabby, as well. My daughter Lucy is a second-year nursing student. I get how tough it is and how hard it is to work in the Queensland health system. I thank each and every nurse, each and every doctor, each and every administration person who works in a hospital. And I'll say this to you, I would never, ever ask you to work even harder. And that's exactly what Minister Cameron Dick and yourself, Premier, have asked Queensland Health staff, the doctors and the nurses, with your costings, $1.1 billion or over $1 billion of efficiency savings, and then the Treasurer of this great state came out shamefully and told our hard-working nurses, just like Gabby, well, she's just got to work a bit harder. Well, I can tell you that that sent shockwaves through the nursing community, and rightfully so. So I will say this, an LNP government have got the nurses' backs. I know what it is like. We've already announced that we will employ thousands more nurses. And the other thing we're going to do is we will support regional maternity services. We won't get rid of them like you have.
Thank you, Nell. We're travelling slightly ahead of time, so I'm just going to rip in a quick question, if that's all right. Premier, Newgate Communications has been undertaking polling on behalf of the government. It was delivered last night, from my understanding, and showed a big increase in people wanting the border open. Does that polling come into your equation when you're making these decisions like you did today? Or is it purely based on the health advice? And if it is the health advice, why conduct the polling?
Well, I can tell you exactly what happened today, and thank you for asking me that, Stephen. So today I started my morning up in Caloundra, out meeting the wonderful people of Caloundra, and then I came down here and I had a briefing with the Chief Health Officer. The Chief Health Officer came in and she presented me with what she wanted to do in relation to the borders. I said to her, is this your expert medical advice? Is this what you want to do? She said yes, and I said, I accept your advice. She has stood us in really good stead. So the announcement today is that Victoria will remain closed to Queensland, and Greater Sydney will remain closed. There's about 32, from memory, local government councils in that area. Now, that's the health advice based on community transmission. I have to accept the Chief Health Officer's advice when I make these decisions. They are in the best interests of the people of this state, and I've had to stand strong on this issue over many, many months and many, many weeks when other people kept calling for the borders to be open. And if that had happened back in July, I still firmly believe the consequences for Queensland families would have been diabolical.
Deb, you get 30-second rebuttal.
Well, I just noted that the Premier didn't address the fact that she spent almost $600,000 of our money, taxpayers' money, on that polling around what Queenslanders thought how the Premier should actually do her election campaign.
That's not true.
The Premier hasn't addressed that. The Premier hasn't addressed that she spent $6 million of taxpayers' money on advertising herself leading up to this campaign against the Fitzgerald principles. Again, how can we trust a Premier that breaches those principles when it is so blatant? Steve, those are the issues, the integrity issues, the trust issues that are there for all of Queenslanders to see. All of Queenslanders to see. The Premier didn't even attempt to answer your question.
Now I'm going to go to questions from the gallery up the back there. First comes Lydia.
Hello. Oh, it is working. Lydia Lynch from the Brisbane Times. No dancing questions today. My question is to...
Oh, I thought there would have been, Lydia.
Sorry. My question is to both leaders. What is one thing that you respect or admire about one another?
Well...
Thanks.
The Premier may need thinking time, so I'll go first. No, look, Lydia, it's a great question, and I'll say this is no matter, and when I've been on the polling booths through this, through the pre-polls, I've been, saying hello to everyone that's handing out and to every candidate, no matter what colour they're wearing, because anyone that stands up for your community and works hard each and every day for what they think is right on behalf of their community, I definitely respect that. And the Premier's been doing that in the Queensland Parliament for 14 years for her on behalf of her community, so I definitely respect that about the Premier, because I know how close that community is to the Premier, just like mine, the electorate of Nanango is to mine, so I definitely respect that.
Well, I respect that, both of us have very strong families, and the fact, and I love this story, that my father often tells, that when your father was mayor, they were in a car together, and they were talking about some political incident that happened, and they got along incredibly well. And I think there needs to be more of that understanding right across the political spectrum, that when you take away the politics, we're all humans, and we all just want the best for our families, our communities and our state.
Thank you. Next question from Mark Ludlow.
Mark Ludlow from the Financial Review. I can't believe Lydia stole my question.
I can't believe that was Lydia.
I've had to quickly cobble together another question. Successive Queensland governments have said they're going to do something about the state's spiralling debt and failed miserably. Under the former Bligh Labor government, total debt was due to hit $65 billion in 2011-12, increasing to $85 billion in 14-15. The Newman government came in 2012 and it was due to reach $79 billion in 2014-15, and there was a projection for $82 billion in 17-18. Under the Palaszczuk Labor government's got progressively worse, projected to hit $90 billion in 2022-23, and this was pre-COVID. Obviously, the pre-budget update showed it was cracking $102 billion this financial year, and who knows how bad it's going to be at the end of the next term because a full budget wasn't released. Can I ask the Premier first, and then obviously if Deb wants to respond, have the Labor Party and the LNP both given up on the debt bomb that's awaiting future generations, or have they both made the calculated political choice that Queensland voters just don't care about debt?
Thanks, Mark. I'm happy to go first. And can I say from the outset, when the Treasurer handed down his fiscal and economic review, we also said very clearly that if we are honoured with being re-elected, we would hand down a full budget before the end of the year. I think everyone knows that the federal budget was handed down basically essentially almost the day that the election was announced. We went into caretaker, and we need all those assessments of the federal government's figures before we can put together our budget. Let me also make it very clear, I've sat in those national cabinet meetings, I've heard from the Governor of the Reserve Bank, I've heard from the Head of Treasury, where they have said to us, to every single person sitting in that national cabinet, now is the time to borrow. Our economic recovery plan, I did bring a copy with me as well, our economic recovery plan is clearly based on $7 billion of stimulus to make sure that we are getting people back into work and making sure that we're growing our regions, but also we have said very clearly that we are going to borrow $4 billion. Now that's on the advice that's coming federally. You would have seen that the federal government is doing exactly the same, and when you are dealing with a world pandemic and a recession, you have to borrow to build. And I think that that is the advice that nearly every single government is taking.
Well, Mark, if I can, thank you. Well, Mark, you clearly and rightfully pointed out that Labor doesn't have a budget this year, and I just want to say one thing. It was the Palaszczuk government that actually brought forward the budget this year to April, knowing full well the federal budget wouldn't have been handed down before that time, to give Queenslanders enough time to assess the state of the finances before the election. And now those goalposts have once again been moved. What I'll say is this: we haven't given up on the debt because we cannot. That would be giving up on our children's future. And that's exactly why when Tim Mander handed down the LNP's costings yesterday, make no mistake, the $4 billion extra that the Labor Party have borrowed has already been borrowed.
And we will reduce that, and now you're borrowing.
And we will reduce that by $2.3 billion because debt will be $2.3 billion less under an LNP government. Now, we must make sure that we listen to the Reserve Bank Governor, who actually said the best way to pay down debt is to grow our economy. And that's exactly what the LNP's visionary plan is all about. It's about growing the economy to create those jobs, to boost industry. That's why we've made manufacturing power cheaper for manufacturers by 20%. There's strategies like that to make people want to invest in Queensland. That's why we're putting Queensland businesses for procurement first, with a target to get everyone who is in Queensland, a Queensland business, either in manufacturing, medical supplies or food, getting them to have a first crack of procurement for Queensland government contracts. I mean, this is the type of policy changes that the state must see and must embrace if we're going to grow this economy and pay down debt.
Next question.
Hi, Jessica Marslick from the Courier Mail. This is a question to both of you, but I'll start with the Premier. In your forward, you just talked about, you reiterated it's a tight election, it'll go down to the wire. You've both said you do not want minority government, but can you both commit to respecting the will of the people and work with the Parliament they deliver to you this weekend?
I'm happy to say very clearly, and I've been upfront about this every single day during the election campaign, I'm asking the people of Queensland for a majority. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. We have to make sure that we administer our economic recovery plan. We need to make sure that we look after people across this state, and the clearest way we can do that is if we have stability and a majority in this government. Now is not the time to risk everything. I think I've demonstrated over the past 5 years that I am committed to the people of this state. Our plan is clearly focused on growing jobs. Our manufacturing industry in Queensland, if you just think, I'll just give this one example to you, is that during the pandemic, a lot of our medical supplies were actually manufactured overseas. Today, we are actually producing in Queensland masks and face shields, things that in the past we relied on to come in from overseas. We can do more of that. There is great appetite out there. I've seen it. I've visited the businesses right across this state. There is so much initiative and innovation out there that I want to absolutely capture that. And also too, we're going to be making trains in Queensland, in Maryborough, with Rockhampton. Not being made overseas, making things more in Queensland. And the only way I can continue the job that I have been doing for the people of this great state is for a majority of government.
Well, thank you for the question as well. And what we cannot afford business as usual, highest unemployment rate in the nation. The reason why I'm asking for a majority government is for each and every Queenslander that is on the unemployment queue, for each and every Queenslander who has been on the long-term unemployment queue, which is over 12 months pre-COVID. That is why we must have a majority government in Queensland, and it must be a majority LNP government if we're going to kickstart this great state of ours.
I think you both successfully avoided that question, but what happens? What happens if you miss out, though? What happens? You're sitting in the room with Paul de Jersey. He says one of you has to go back and test your numbers. You're going to say,
"There's election
sorry,
tomorrow.
Governor.
There's an election
no to
tomorrow,"
you.
and I'm putting my faith in the people of this state. I'm asking for a majority government.
Well, I'm definitely putting my faith in the people of Queensland, and I'm asking for a majority government.
We cleared that up.
We'll agree on that, Premier.
Who's next?
Stephanie Zillman from the ABC. My question is for Deb Frecklington. You've said that you would like to wait until you see the legislation, but what is your personal ethical view on voluntary assisted dying?
Yeah, look, thank you very much, Steph, for the question. This would be one of the most deeply personal, very hard issue that any person would ever have to face. What I want to see is to make sure that no one dies in pain or alone, and that's why I've advocated for more palliative care and more compassion. But what I will say is this: I would never, ever politicise this issue like Annastacia Palaszczuk has. This is an issue that was rightfully sent to the Law Reform Commission because it will be one of the most serious pieces of legislation that is ever confronting a parliamentarian. And that is why I agreed with the Premier. We had a bipartisan agreement to send it to the Law Reform Commission so the right people were writing the legislation. And that is the best place for it, because we must make sure the legislation is right. I cannot stand here and tell you how we would vote on this. No one can, because we don't know the bounds of the legislation. This is a serious issue, a very serious issue. And I would put to you one of the most serious issues that a parliamentarian would ever face. And that is why you must look at the legislation, look at what the boundaries are in that legislation, and you must consult your community. But I'll say this, I won't politicise it like what has been happening in the last month, which is exactly what happens, which appears like it has just been for the Premier to secure Currumbin.
Well, I reject that absolutely. Let me talk about something that is incredibly personal and it means a lot to a lot of people in this state. I would support voluntary assisted dying, and my government, if we are re-elected, we will bring that in so the Parliament can actually make a decision about that on behalf of the people that they represent. Secondly, I have said that the members of my team will be allowed a conscience vote. Now let me tell you why my views have changed on this. I consider myself a Christian. I went to a Catholic school. I hold deep Christian values. But it's not for me to tell other people how to end their lives. I've put extra money into palliative care, over $170 million, which we announced during the election. That is absolutely needed. And during this pandemic, I lost my grandmother. And it was a very distressing time for me. And just like a lot of other people, I couldn't go and see her when she passed away. We were limited to 2 people in that room. She went through incredible pain. In fact, the day she called me, when she was in pain, I couldn't go. I had meetings in the city, so I had to ask my mum to go. I don't want anyone to suffer. I don't want anyone to have to go through that. And I'm just saying to Queenslanders, it is a personal matter for a family and the individual and their medical practitioners. It is not for me to make the decision on behalf of them.
Thank you, Premier. Next question, please.
Claire Barnes from the 10 Network, and my question's to the Leader of the Opposition. Deb, you've repeatedly called that you want to see more common sense, consistency and compassion around the border closure. Do you think the Chief Health Officer has been too cautious?
Well, thank you, Claire, for the question. I certainly have called for more consistency, more compassion, and definitely some more common sense when it comes to the exemptions that have been granted. Now, over 2,100, so 2,100 exemptions have been granted to AFL footballers and AFL executives, and many more to celebrities like Danny Minogue and Tom Hanks. Everyone knows about that. But yet we've seen people like Sarah Cassett, who was unable to say goodbye to her father, and there was no reason why there couldn't have been some common sense in that decision and just allow that poor girl to say goodbye to her father during his dying minutes. There was no reason why people who were having life-saving brain surgery in Sydney, because they can't get it in Queensland, why those people couldn't recuperate at home. When you've got Professor Charlie Teo writing a letter pleading for those people to be able to recuperate at home. But instead, they're in hotel rooms without even microwaves, and all they needed to heat up a wheat pack to put on their head because they've just had brain surgery. I mean, this is the type of compassion that we're looking for. But the consistency should have happened. The questions around the AFL people and the celebrities, and then that's okay because supposedly from the Premier is saying, but they bring money in. But people really matter, and people really have been hurting. And so what I would have said is that I would have, and I have said it repeatedly, if I were Premier, I would have asked the Chief Health Officer to establish COVID-safe plans for people who are at the end of their life and who could attend a funeral. I mean, the vision of Sarah going to her dad's funeral or missed it altogether with all of that gear on. should never leave people's minds.
Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. And of course, the reason we have exemptions is because of borders, and the borders have kept Queenslanders safe. Now, today we had one new case in hotel quarantine, but in Queensland we have no community transmission. That's the Queensland I want. And the reason we have that is because Dr. Young has provided her medical advice to us, and she has helped to keep us safe. Now, in relation to exemptions on compassionate grounds, Queensland has actually granted the most out of any other state or territory, over 1,100. I recognise that this is an extremely difficult time for people. I know that people have loved ones in other parts of Australia, and I hope that we get to the stage in the near future where all of Australia can move around together again. But until we get community transmission under control, that cannot happen. So I say to the Leader of the Opposition, you have to, in this position as Premier, you have to be guided by the expert advice. We do that with catastrophic fires. We do that with cyclones. If you don't stand by the expert advice, you cannot lead this state. You have to take the advice, otherwise you put others' lives at risk. And that would have put the livelihoods of others at risk as well.
Jonathan Lee from Sky News. Question to the opposition leader. I'd just like to follow up on what you just spoke about, because it's very easy in many regards to talk about common sense and compassion, and I'm trying to dig down a little bit more to actually find out where you actually fall on the issue of borders. We've had David Littleproud come out today on Sky and say we need to come up with another way to open the Queensland borders to allow people to travel up into Queensland. We've had the Chief Health Officer talk about if there is community transmission, well then those people in those areas and those regions can't come up to Queensland. If you're elected as Premier, do you commit to following the advice of the Chief Health Officer, or will you go it alone, make a captain's call? Are you going to follow the health advice? Because there needs to be more clarity than simply talking about common sense and compassion. Where do you fall?
Well, exactly what I have been saying, and that is the borders shouldn't have to be closed for any longer than they need to be. But I will follow the advice of the Chief Health Officer.
Quick response.
I think Queenslanders know the Leader of the Opposition's views on she wanted the borders to be open.
And the Premier opened the borders after that. It was before the Victorian outbreak, and I think the Premier has liked to have an election campaign based on that. Premier, it's pretty obvious.
Move on. I think I know where this is headed. Next.
Rob Morrison from 9 News. For something fresh, I'm going to ask another COVID question and a follow-up to the one we just heard. We saw an announcement about border restrictions today that has continued to lock out Greater Sydney. What the Chief Health Officer didn't say, and we've always said you'd follow the advice, was that the 4 cases she's worried about are from the same house. Now, my question is to Deb, but I'd like the Premier's response as well. Deb, you said today whatever decision the Premier made would be politicised. It would be politically motivated, but at the same time you've said you'll follow the Chief Health Officer's advice. Today, given the briefing that the Premier would have had, would you have politicised the issue by following the Chief Health Officer's advice? And if not, what decision would you have made?
Well, the advantage that the Premier has had today is a full briefing from the Chief Health Officer, of which I haven't had the briefing that the Premier has had. Rob, what I have said earlier, to contradict what you just said to me, is I have said that the Premier has politicised the borders. The Premier has politicised this issue the whole way through the pandemic because there's an election on. And that's been very clear. And I think the taxpayers' money that's been spent going into that and the polling that the Premier refuses to release and is hidden behind apparently Cabinet in confidence, I think, but that hasn't been released. So we haven't seen any of that information, Rob. And so that is why I think the Premier's position, when I've said she's politicised the borders. That is exactly what the Premier's been doing for the last several months.
Do you support the Chief Health Officer's advice
I've
today?
just said I did, Premier, I do, and I actually called before you stood up and did your press conference when I was doing my rounds of morning TV. I actually said, at the very least, we must see that there be exemptions further into New South Wales, and that's exactly what the Chief Health Officer advised you to do today, of which you followed.
Quick rebuttal.
I just want to say that, look, every single day during this pandemic, Dr Miles, my deputy, and myself, we have listened to the Chief Health Officer. And I'm actually encouraged by the way in which Queenslanders have come up and spoken to me about this issue, and the fact that they can live their lives and enjoy their Queensland lifestyle like people cannot actually in Victoria. So people can come along today, they can go and do their shopping, they can go to work, they can go and see a movie, they can go out and meet friends and family, they can go to a bar after work. This is not happening in other places around the world. The pandemic is still with us, and it only takes one breach or one person coming in, and we've seen what happens when the people came back from Victoria and the cluster outbreaks. And that contact tracing, there is a lot of effort that goes into that.
Just got to wrap it up now, Premier.
Yeah, sure, I know, but it's a very complex situation that we are dealing with, and it is not an easy fix. You have to listen to the health advice, and at the end, it has worked for Queensland. Queensland is in this envious position now that other parts around the world are simply not in.
Now we're going to move to final questions to each other. Any volunteers? Who wants to go first?
Me?
So,
Happy
okay.
to do it. Happy to
Go,
do
Deb.
it. Premier, my final question to you. You have claimed that Jackie Trad won't be in your cabinet. However, union leaders, and I note there's many of you here today, my job here is done. Thank you. So, Premier, I'll start again. Look, you've claimed that Jackie Trad won't be in your cabinet, but the union leaders have said that it isn't true because you don't pick the cabinet. You've promised to Queenslanders just before the last election that Curtis Pitt would be your treasurer. That was your promise. But the unions installed Jackie Trad. So how can Queenslanders trust you, given that you're just a puppet for the unions?
How are those property developers going? Seriously. They're banned. They're banned. Look, let me say this very clearly. My team works as a team, and we get up every day and we want the best for the people of this state. I'm very honoured and privileged to work with a bunch of people that represent their communities. They fight hard, they have the best interests at heart of the families in those communities, and they perform their ministerial duties and obligations to the best of their abilities. And I'll say this about them, hardly any of them have had a break at all this year,
Jackie,
dealing with this pandemic. No, dealing with this pandemic. These are very serious issues. And really, honestly, Deb, to come in and to trivialise this issue today, in the midst of a pandemic, when we're talking about the one thing that Queenslanders want to hear about is the future and jobs and a safe environment to raise their families, I think it shows very clearly who is fit to be the leader of this state. Yeah. And my final question.
Final question, Premier.
If the borders had opened on July the 1st, as you demanded, what do you think the impact would have been on Queensland?
Well, Premier, given that was before the outbreak of the the second wave in Victoria, I know the Premier's loving today to rewrite a bit of history, but it's just simply not true. Of course, I've said I would listen to the health advice, and that is exactly what happened. I was the first to call for the borders to close to Victoria when that outbreak happened. Premier, you were 2 days after that, when you decided to follow the advice and close those borders. I went on radio here in Brisbane and said that because the Victorian outbreak hadn't happened, when the business community, when everyone in Queensland was screaming
64 times.
Yeah, I did, and you listened. And that's the point. The Premier listened under pressure from the opposition, listened and stuck to her roadmap and actually opened the borders, miraculously. Premier, you can rewrite history as much as you like, but that is the fact. The health advice changed, and that is why the borders rightfully shut to Victoria at the time.
If I had listened to Deb Frecklington, to Scott Morrison, to Josh Frydenberg, to Peter Dutton, to everyone else who was demanding that the borders be reopened, we could have ended up like Victoria, and thank God we didn't.
Now we're going to move along to closing statements.
Okay, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your patience through those questions as well. Look, I just want to say this again. The choice is really, really clear. Do we go for a team that has vision, ambition, a bit of energy, a bit of passion, a bit of drive for the future of this great state, drive for our children's future? A government that actually wants to look after you, not the government. A government that actually understands that if you grow this great economy of ours, you will create jobs. A government that understands that if you invest in infrastructure, if you invest in schools and hospitals and the health services, that Queensland will be a better place. And if you invest to grow in this great state, businesses will have confidence to get back and set up here in this great state of ours. Queensland cannot afford to have another 4 years of failure, 4 years of the highest unemployment rate in the nation, the highest number of bankruptcies, the lowest business confidence, NAPLAN scores going backwards, 56,000 Queenslanders on the hospital wait list because the Palaszczuk government have refused to look at what the real priorities are in Queensland, and that is the people of Queensland. Ladies and gentlemen, the choice is really clear. 4 more years of failure and business as usual of highest unemployment rate in the nation, being at the bottom of the economic ladder, or aiming towards being at the top of the economic ladder, so our kids' future really can be and will be secured.
Premier, wrap it up.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. Before I came here, I bumped into some school children at Parliament House, and I thought about what sort of Queensland I want for them. And I thought about the training opportunities and the education opportunities and how we're putting together pathways so they can follow their dreams. That's why we're investing in more education. That's why we're investing in more health services across our state. We value our doctors and our nurses and our paramedics and everyone that works together. We're rebuilding those frontline services that were savagely cut by the LNP. And then I move across the regions and I think how wonderful our regions are. Every region is different, but at the end of the day, we're all Queenslanders. We all want the same things. We want our family to be well taken care of. We want jobs. And the reason why jobs are so significant is that there is dignity in having a job. My grandfather was a boilermaker. He said to me it was tough work, but it was a job that I could put food on the table. He lived in Inala in a housing commission house that he later bought and stayed there until he died. He never wanted to leave Inala. He never wanted to leave Queensland. He loved this state. And Queensland is a place of great opportunity. He came out here as a migrant and he did the best he could for his family. And I want the best for every single family in this state. So there is a clear choice this Saturday. Do you want stability or do you want chaos and reckless behaviour? Our plan is fully costed, it's fully funded. The LNP have put a pure hoax on regional Queensland. The Bradfield scheme doesn't even eventuate for 10 or 15 years' time. There is no duplication or four-laning of the Bruce Highway. There is no funding for it. And the only way the LNP can fund its unfunded commitments is to cut. We've heard it all from Campbell Newman again. The Leader of the Opposition was his Assistant Minister, and more will come. I'm asking Queenslanders to stay the course. Now is the time for us to be united and stand together. If we continue to work together and not be divided, we can achieve anything. And we've seen that through the COVID crisis. I'm asking Queenslanders to stick with me. You know me. I hope you trust me. I trust you. I will stand up every day. I will fight for you. I'll work for you. And I'll always stand up for Queensland. I'll take the tough decisions because I have your best interests at heart every single day of the week.
Thank you. That concludes the Leaders Debate for 2020. Please join me in thanking Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk and Opposition Leader Deb Frecklington.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if you've got nothing to do over the weekend, a copy of this debate will be available on the Queensland Media Club's website sometime soon, hopefully, Pete. And I once again like to thank our naming rights sponsors, Brisbane Airport Corporation, Dial Before You Dig and Griffith University for their sponsorship. If you'd like to receive information about upcoming Queensland Media Club's events, please drop your business card in the bowl at the registration desk on your way out. Thanks very much.